Walking the Sacred Way, Ekklēsía in Greece from Assembly to Body. I decided to title this presentation Walking the Sacred Way because I felt that while you're going to learn about the sacred way that's literally in Greece, metaphorically, it really speaks to me both on this academic journey as well as my own personal spiritual journey while I was there. And I think ultimately the question that I kind of went with, not necessarily what I came away with exactly, but where I went with was why and how has the word ecclesia been adopted and used interchangeably with the word church, when originally it was a Greek concept that represented the assembly of people, citizens called out into the public space. So how did we get from there to what we have today is kind of the question that I went to Greece with. And I discovered that and much more as I walked the sacred way. So we will begin here, and I chose a photograph from ancient Olympia, where the first Olympic Games were held. This is the starting line. The stone to the right is the original, and the left is a reproduction. So they filled in the whole thing, and it goes all the way across the stadium at Olympia as the starting point, where they would put their toes on the front line and then their back foot, the toes on the second line as they would start a race. So I thought that was appropriate for starting here tonight. So in Greece, I explored the concept of ecclesia as assembly in this Hellenic polis, or the city-state, and why it was adopted to represent the body of Jesus followers, also known as churches. So those core questions that I examined, both assembly and body, through this are basically, first and foremost, who belongs? Who is invisible? What kind of preparation is needed when entering such a community? And what does ancient Greece reveal that is special about the Christian ecclesia? So as we begin, it's not going down for me. Let's try it again. There we go. This is the group that we traveled with. The two students on the far left are PhD students in biblical interpretation. Dr. Matthews, I meant to have this handy. I would like you to know kind of, so you have a framework of not just what we were doing there, but who I was doing it with. I wanted you to know the professors. So hang on just a second here. I meant to have it open. All right, so the woman in the straw hat is Dr. Shelley Matthews, and the man to her left with the glasses is Dr. Jeremy Williams, who are our two New Testament professors that led this immersion trip. And Dr. Matthews earned her doctorate of theology in New Testament and Christian origins at Harvard University. Her areas of specialty include feminist biblical interpretation, the books of Luke and Acts, early Christian martyrdom, and early Christian anti-Judaism. She's an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church and enjoys both preaching and teaching about Scripture. She also is convinced of the value of travel study experiences, hence why she brought us along on this, particularly with students to Turkey and Greece to study ancient sites important to understanding the imperial context of early Jews and Christians. And then Dr. Williams, next to her, Reverend Jeremy Williams, PhD, is a global thinker, award-winning teacher, and ordained preacher. He recently received tenure at Bright, but has been a New Testament professor and also is the inaugural director of the Center for Theology and Justice. He is a scholar of religion who graduated from Vanderbilt for his undergrad He went and got his Master of Divinity at Yale Divinity School and his PhD at Harvard. He's the author of several publications, including Criminalization in Acts of the Apostles, Race, Rhetoric, and the Prosecution of an Early Christian Movement. He's currently working on a manuscript entitled Abolitionist Acts of the Apostles. He regularly teaches courses on biblical interpretation, the books of Luke and Acts, Paul's letters, prison industrial complex, abolition, race, and justice. He's pastored small and large CME congregations, which is Christian Methodist Episcopalian, which is an African-American, traditionally African-American church denomination in the U.S. And he's married and has a 3-year-old. So those are the two professors. The gentleman behind the two of them, Billy, is also a pastor and working on his Master's of Theological Studies. The gentleman behind me in the bright blue shirt, Derek, is just graduated with his Master's of Theological Studies. He also is an active pastor with doing his continuing education. And the gal in the straw hat to my side with the dark sunglasses on is Carly. And Carly is also a Master of Divinity student like me. She currently serves at First Christian Church in Granbury, Texas. And then you recognize this face. There's Margie. And Margie is a Master of Arts in Theology and Ministry, I think. Is that your degree, Margie?
Yes.
And so Margie is like me, a second career seminarian. And so I just welcoming you again tonight for being here with us. So this is who we journeyed through Greece with. And real quickly, this is kind of a map of where we went. So it's not an exact topographically map because I engaged ChatGPT to help me with it. And it put Eleusis in the wrong place and it put a few things kind of in weird areas. So, but generally, we covered the bulk of mainland Greece. So we started in Athens. We went south to Sunion, which is where the temple to Poseidon is. Then we went to Eleusis, to the Temple of Demeter, on to ancient Corinth. And we spent a lot of time in ancient Corinth, obviously, because as New Testament students, we were studying the stories that we could actually grasp and go see these places and visualize the people that have been named in the books of Acts and First and Second Corinthians. So then we went on and stayed in Naphtalion as kind of a base, beautiful area. And Epidaurus is also where the sanctuary of Asclepius is, which was a healing sanctuary. When I say sanctuary, it's a large area with multiple buildings, theaters, stadiums. It's basically a healing complex. So you'll see some of that. We also did a little wine tasting. We got to visit an olive oil press company and see the process of pressing olive oil. And we did that in Kalamata. So if you like Kalamata olives, that's where they actually come from. Mm. And then we went on to Olympia, ancient Olympia. We stayed outside of there, and then we went to the ruins and spent a good amount of time there. I thought it was just going to be a delight to get to be where the original Olympics were, but I had no idea how much I was going to learn in that place. And then we crossed the Gulf and went to Delphi in the mountains. And that was fascinating. So my title of Walking the Sacred Way is primarily from there. And then we traveled on north and went to see the hanging monasteries of Meteora. And there are 7 monasteries that are like precariously perched, some almost on the edge of these rock formations that just seem to just jet straight up out of the earth. It's kind of otherworldly. And we visited one of those monasteries. And then back to Athens. So that is the crux of our 2 weeks together in Greece. All right, so um, if you are interested in following some of this from a study standpoint yourself, I would invite you to read the book of Acts and the book of First Corinthians, and particularly focus on Acts chapter 17 and First Corinthians chapter 12. We tend to say, oh, First Corinthians 13, that's the love chapter, right? Tells us how to be in the world. But 12 portrays the Christian Ekklēsía. And both Acts 17 and First Corinthians 12 do so as a reimagining, I think, as a reimagining of assembly in which participation is no longer grounded in status or citizenship or power, but in mutual belonging and interdependence. That's really my thesis of this. And so while Paul wasn't really attempting to reform Roman society, the communal vision that he articulated did challenge the prevailing assumptions about honor, hierarchy, and the value of those whom society rendered invisible. Reading these texts through the landscapes of Athens and Corinth reveals how early Christian communities struggled to embody the vision within the social realities of Roman Greece. What defined Hellenic and later Greco-Roman belonging? In this birthplace of democracy, everything valued was for the common good. Political voice. You'll see you'll see graffiti basically on the first floor of most buildings in the city of Athens, in the older parts of the city. It is not all political, but it is largely political on some level, and it's encouraged. Another thing that is valued and for the common good is managing one's emotions. This is a charioteer. It's a famous statue, bronze statue, and it's basically between the archaic period and the classical period of art where we begin to start seeing motion and movement in the sculptures. But what you'll notice is even though he is moving and supposedly the winner of the race and circling the arena and celebrating with all of the community, his face is still relatively unemotional. And so I chose this because one of the values of ancient Greece is self-control and managing your emotions. This is a piece of a mosaic tile floor in a house. You see my feet there at the edge, so you can kind of get a sense. It's one of several. But I'm using these examples to kind of paint a picture of ancient Greece and what they valued, because that is what the Apostle Paul and the early Jesus followers were that were moving in there from and meeting with the Greeks. This is the culture, these are the values of the place where they entered that may have had different norms than where they came from. And so it was really important to kind of understand that before we start appropriating our Christian texts and those stories that we are familiar with onto this place. And so the desire to better oneself isn't just for the individual victory. It's celebrated with the whole community. And one of the things I chose this because he is a victor. And another interesting little piece is they had Olympic Games in lots of places. And the crown of leaves that would have been given to the victor varied. We think of the laurel wreath a lot of times. We see that in Roman depictions, but they said that depending on where the games were being held, If the bay tree was more prevalent, then you would have the laurel leaves. If you were in olive country, for instance, closer to Olympia and Kalamata, then the wreath would have been made out of an olive branch. But still, the celebration is to encourage everyone to step up and do their best, but to be celebrated for it by the whole community and to be able to give back to the whole community. The other thing is humility. They very value humility. They also, when people step out of line or say, nope, it's all about me. In this case, there was a general, I can't remember his name right now, but he kind of started running with scissors and wanting it to be all his way or the highway. And he just thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And that hubris was unacceptable in Hellenistic society because it was dangerous. Because when you get that kind of hubris, it starts to deteriorate all of the community. And so in his case, they threw him in a dark hole. And this was the dark hole that we had to go through 2 tunnels and another small anteroom in order to even get into this. It's inside the walls of like a fort on top of a mountain. So they said, no, 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 you can't be that way. And the people spoke up and locked him away. The other thing is that when people cheated in the Olympics, this is in Olympia, if they cheated or in general, if they broke the law or the rules, there was some place where they were publicly shamed. And in this case, this is a long stone, really, but I just took a snippet of it where they carved the names of the people that broke the rules. This would be like today if somebody in the Olympics was caught doping. They would have their name engraved here for all to see that they were a stinker. And in addition to their name, their whole community was listed as well. And so this, when they were representing another place, that other community was shamed in the process of them being shamed. So it wasn't this whole culture is not individualistic. It's really about the common good. So every civilization tells stories of its greatness, but we were challenged to think about who paid the cost for that. Um, so who made the corrugated bath tiles so people wouldn't slip in the Roman bathhouses? Who was doing the labor to build the 15,000 seat theater at Epidaurus that's still used today, by the way?
Mm.
Who carved all the beauty that we see in these temples up on the Acropolis? These are the maidens, the porch maidens that are part of the I don't remember the name of that particular temple. It's to Athena on one side. Margie, do you remember the name of that temple on the top of the Acropolis?
I don't remember.
Okay, so there's the Parthenon. There were several temples up there. The Parthenon's the big one that we think of. And then there's a smaller one. And out to the side of that is a porch, covered porch. And these are the posts, the pillars of the covered porch. These are the originals. They're now in the Acropolis Museum that's literally right next door to the Acropolis. And what's in its place now are reproductions on the outside. Who lifted the stones and built the temples? It was mainly slave labor. We know that. And even though there was manumission, manumission wasn't all that it seemed to be. So as we were studying for this trip, some of the reading that we had helped me realize that you may have been manumitted from being someone's slave, but there were usually conditions, caveats. So it might say, you're no longer the slave of this person, but you after the next 10 years, or you have to wait till this person dies and you will not be passed to any other family members. You'll be manumitted, but you still have to serve this person the rest of their life. Or you were manumitted to the gods. So they could have manumitted you to the god Apollo. And in that case, you would have gone and served in the temple. So you went from one slave condition into a different kind of enslaved condition. So manumission, while on the surface seemed really like a really good thing, the more I learned about it, the more it was really heartbreaking because people never really truly escaped slavery. And then when we were in ancient Corinth, Dr. Williams and I, he loved having one-on-ones with the students and just kind of walking and talking. And when he walked and talked with me, he said, where you sit determines how you respond. And even now, I'm getting a little teary, but I had not really thought about what does that mean or what does that look like before this trip. Um, I really struggled for the next 24 hours. I had a faucet turn on that I didn't know where that came from, and I didn't know how to turn it off. Um, and so this was a very powerful moment for me. And it was thankfully at the beginning of the trip because it helped me frame my perception of the things that we were to see. So, from where I sit, I am a privileged white woman, higher educated, affluent enough to be able to pay for this trip out of pocket, to choose to sit at a rooftop dining restaurant rather than eating street food, and to choose who's at the table with me. That's just the start, right? So thinking about where do I sit, and I encourage you to think, where do I sit? From where am I sitting that I am making these judgments about whatever's happening in the world today? I love this image. Obviously, this is the Parthenon at night on top of the Acropolis. And from my vantage point, I can see multiple layers, and people that are down below or in the middle. Um, and so I just think this is an interesting depiction of thinking about where we sit, and our perceptions of what's happening in the world. Another one is the PhD students were required to give us presentations on the trip. And Penny did one at the sanctuary to Demeter in Eleusis on authority and power. And I hadn't really thought about those two things side by side before. And I think what I took away from that I think is a good representation of thinking about where we sit and how that determines our response is that we may not have authority or we may not have been given authority, but we still have power. And everyone has power. And obviously, that's why community organizing for ABCD works well because you have people power, right? So even in Greece, participation did not always mean you were equal. So I always thought, yay, it's a birthplace of democracy. Everybody's equal. Everybody's celebrated, right? Not one victor. But it still had slaves. It still excluded foreigners. Still excluded women from certain things. And so your citizenry really determined where you showed up in the ancient Ekklēsía, in that assembly. It determined your place, your status in that. So, Dr. Williams also asked us what stories are told to legitimate systems of power and the subjugation of others. To his point, assemblies are never neutral. They always determine who belongs, who speaks, and whose contributions remain invisible. Democracy, empire, religion, and even archaeology can become stories that privilege some voices while silencing others. In Athens' agora or marketplace, archaeologists were so bent on uncovering this ancient site within the city of Athens that they forcibly removed numerous homes and businesses and destroyed 80 Byzantine churches.
Hmm.
But we have a really stunning rebuilt stoa out of the project. I'm being sarcastic. I mean, it is beautiful. It's the Stoa is this long building. It would have had originally, it would have had stores in it, shopkeepers, kind of an indoor marketplace. And they may have also had government meetings, could have been held there as well. This is the Stoa that is part of the ancient Athens agora. Uh, if you can kind of see in this image, I'll show you more later, but where you see lighter columns, pieces that are lighter white versus darker, that's where you can see the lighter white is all new and the darker, creamier colors are the original. And so they literally put this thing back together and built it. And it is now a museum inside, and it's absolutely a stunning work of architectural art, if you ask me. But I still ask that question. So, who was displaced to build this new monument? Who suffered for the beauty, right? What happened to those people that had homes in this space after all these, several thousand years that had to be removed because they wanted to bring this piece back to life?
Hmm.
And it also happened here at the Acropolis Museum, which is the newest thing. The Acropolis Museum is a beautiful museum. It was in existence when Dave and I went in 2019, but I'm not sure when it actually was finished being built. It's really new. But they built it on top of these revealed ancient ruins of the city of Athens. And much of the museum has those plexiglass floors that you can see down through as well as you move through the museum. This is on the outside entrance to the museum. So, in order to get to this beautiful history, someone else had to be removed from this space as well. Okay, let me find my place again. So I'm still looking here at the ancient Ekklēsía, the value of assembly, participation, citizenship for the benefit of whole society. But it's important to note that we never encounter Greece directly. This is a quote from Stella Galani, who was one of our tour guides. And it was interesting because Stella, I asked her at the end of the week, how did you learn to do all this? Did you have to go study history or archaeology or anthropology? And she says, no, in Greece, that's what you do. You train to do just that job, to be able to tell all of this. But then she also went back and got a degree in cultural anthropology. So her stories of the encounters and all these places that we went, and really talking about the people and the culture and the ancient Greeks, it just added so much, I think, to what we were able to receive on this trip. But she says we never encounter Greece directly. It's always through the lens of someone or something else. What we typically see is Roman. Instead of being, okay, so this is an example of a column, like the Corinthian column crown, right? The top piece. And I just wanted you to see this mirrors the plant in front of it. So those leaves are basically reflecting what they see all over the city of Athens and a lot of Greece was this native plant here. But unlike that, what we see in Greece, rather than being an actual reflection of that, is really through the lens of conquerors. Even the word Greek is Roman. The people still consider themselves Hellenes. And what we see that is stone, mainly foundations there, the stone in the foreground, that was Greek. And the buildings would have been made of wood, and that's why they didn't last. And what is brick? Let me go back. What's brick behind it? So everything that is stone is typically Greek, and everything that is brick is Roman in this case. This is an ancient Olympia. And here, this is in the stadium at Olympia. The judges of the games were given special seating in this little area here, as well as the high priestess, who was sitting across from the judges on the other side. But the people simply gathered on the lawn in the stadium. I can imagine them picnicking. And Stella said, Hellenic is pure, as the Hellenes were free spirits, but the Romans organized everything. And this is a Roman stadium. So you can see the difference of a Greek stadium has all this grassy knoll kind of thing. And then the Roman stadium is all organized, has all this seating and benches put in. This is actually the stadium at Delphi. So even archaeology interprets Greece for us. Like in ancient Corinth, where I looked down and noticed, here's a picture of ancient Corinth. I looked down and saw these two stones with these crosses on them, and my brain was like, wait a minute. All of a sudden, I just was thrust into another era and I couldn't compute. I was like, where have I seen those before? And it finally dawned on me that those are from the Crusades. So when the Crusades came to this part of Greece, they settled on top of ancient Corinth, and now they have Frankish Corinth. This is a section that thankfully the archaeologists did not decide to demolish Frankish Corinth ruins in order just to get to the original Greek ruins underneath them. They know they're there, but they decided to preserve this piece of the history that came later. They left it alone. So, like we don't encounter Greece directly, we also don't encounter the early church directly either. We encounter the early church through Luke's interpretation, as is written in the book of Acts, and through Paul's letters. This foreground piece was part of the Agora marketplace in Corinth originally, but it later became a church. And so it was used longer than the rest of it. So the building and this kind of arch part was preserved because of that. And I just thought this was an interesting juxtaposition of seeing what was an early church site and then the temple to Apollo behind it. So thinking in terms of interpretation, how do we see things? How do we interpret? It's through someone else's lens, right? And so our lens of understanding parts of the New Testament are through all the different authors of what has come together in the canon of the New Testament. And in this case, where we went, It was the author who wrote the books of the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles, as well as the undisputed letters of the Apostle Paul. This is some interesting gold that were gifts at Delphi when people were coming from all over the world and saying we would like the Oracle of Delphi to see what her visions have to say for us, and they would bring these gifts, and they're now in the museum there. Throughout this trip, the class encountered recurring themes of beauty and civilization and sacred memory, resting upon, though, the sacrifices and enslavement of others. Who makes participation possible and who remains invisible within communities that claim to be for the common good? I wrestled with this ethical paradox. Let me show you why. So in Corinth, this is in Athens, but there is this is the Odeon of the Odeon of something Atticus. I'm not good with my Roman titles. This is still used today. Dave and I were seeing a concert that got rained out, so we didn't actually experience it. So it's still used. This Odeon is a really incredibly beautiful theater. But the Odeon historically was reserved for the elite. So hierarchy, status, again, it just keeps coming back, right? And so we're talking about a society that praises itself for being all about the common good, and yet we still see examples. And just like this is in Corinth, there's an Odeon in Corinth that only music and poetry could be heard by the elites. The theater was for everyone else. And this is the theater. It looks smaller in the picture than it really is. I would say it's probably 30 or 40 yards in length in that staging area. And then everybody would have been sitting on the hillside. So that tree kind of there it's a tree, it's not a shrub. To kind of give you some, I should have had a person go stand over there so you can see. When we're taking pictures in the moment, you're not even thinking about what kind of presentation you're going to give. But the point being that people were still saying, we're for everybody and everybody contributes. But even though everybody contributes, not everyone got to participate. And so we saw so much beauty. We saw so much development, hope, growth. You have all the good things. You have the potential not good things, anything that's predatory or colonization, and kind of this juxtaposition of those. But in all of those cases, it was at someone who is invisible. It was at their expense. And so I kind of wrestled with that ethical paradox throughout this trip. So if the Hellenes defined community through citizenship, and the Romans define it through hierarchy and social order, and the Americans by success and upward mobility, what kind of community was Paul teaching that the way of Jesus was to be? Well, he described a body in which the weakest members of a society are indispensable to the whole. The Christian Ekklēsía attempted to see invisible people differently. By using the metaphor of a body, Paul offers a vision of community that is grounded in interdependence rather than status. The body has many members, yet each belongs to the whole. Diversity is not a threat to unity, but a condition of it. The eye cannot dismiss the hand. The head cannot dismiss the feet. Every member contributes something necessary when we think of the Ekklēsía as a body, not just an assembly. Paul's body metaphor challenges ancient assumptions about whose contributions matter most. In Olympia, somebody need to be muted maybe. In Olympia is this archway. It leads from the stadium into what's considered the sanctuary. The sanctuary is a large area with multiple buildings. But the stadium was considered secular, so it was separated from the sanctuary. And in this archway, there's no mortar. This has been here since about the 6th century BC. There's no mortar. It's held together by a keystone. And as in most keystones, the keystone is often the least noticed. Likewise, the people who sustain a community are often those whom society overlooks, those regarded as weak, secondary, or who are othered for any reason, may in fact be essential to communal flourishing. Paul's vision represents a profound reimagining of Ekklēsía. The Greek civic assembly was structured around privilege and exclusion. Full participation depended upon membership within a narrowly defined group, but Paul's Christian assembly seeks to redefine belonging around interdependence where difference is not erased, but integrated. I love this image of the two kinds of diet soda, about the same thing, but still different. I also shared this because if you're familiar with the Bible scripture about new wine, you cannot put new wine into old wine skins. I saw this when we went to the winery that day, and I thought, aha, that's a good illustration. So to illustrate further Paul's Christian assembly, seeking to redefine belonging around interdependence where difference is not erased but integrated, we see the women that are all over the New Testament and as disciples of Jesus. Phoebe herself was a pastor of a church at Centrae. She was also entrusted with taking Paul's letter to Rome, and she likely preached that to the public in Rome. So Phoebe was this minister. Prisca and Aquila hosted gatherings in their homes. This is all from Paul's writings and from the book of Acts. Junia is named among the apostles. Paul's writings really read like a map of relationships stretching across the Roman world, where leadership is distributed rather than centralized. Participation occurs through networks of mutual support rather than through a single hierarchical structure. These are the hanging monasteries of Meteora I mentioned earlier.
Look at that.
See how they're just perched on those rocks. Oh. And this is inside the one of the monasteries that we visited. Pilgrims approached the sanctuaries of Eleusis and Delphi. Let me catch up with my visuals here. This is still inside the hanging monasteries. Okay, so this piece of stone or area of stone, I took a picture of it because this has been here since the 6th century BC. This is a piece of the original, what they called the Sacred Way, which was a literal path up the mountain to the temple where the oracle at Delphi would sit on her tripod and have her visions. And pilgrims would approach the sanctuary, not only here at Delphi, also at Eleusis, by walking what was considered the Sacred Way. It's also a process that is practiced in Greece as a path of physical and spiritual, mental and emotional cleansing, It was a holistic at the sanctuary of Asclepius here in Epidaurus. This is their stadium. They also had a theater. It was a holistic approach to healing because they wanted your mind, body, spirit to be working in toward your healing, not just whatever was going to come from the actual treatment. Now, this is actually, there were two of these. This is a bench, like a waiting area along the sacred way. This is on the sacred way at Delphi, and this is the treasury of Athens. And so people would bring their money and give their money to get their pigeon or dove or whatever it was that they could afford to be able to make a sacrifice on the altar when they got to the top of the mountain at Delphi. But they would go through this process. This is Delphi right here. And you see it's high on a mountaintop overlooking a deep valley. And people would go through this process of cleansing and preparation mentally, physically, emotionally before entering holy and healing sanctuaries. And so for me, these ancient roots, while reading Acts and Paul's letters, had me asking, so what kind of preparations required for entering community today? The quick answer that I wanted to give was none. Come on, come on. And then I thought, well, Ekklēsía has tenets. We have conversation agreements. That could be considered preparation for entering our own Ekklēsía. The earliest Christian Ekklēsía may be understood as its own sacred way, as a communal practice of learning how to belong to one another. Some of us have heard the term Ubuntu. It's an African term. And it's the same concept of I belong to you and you belong to me. And so to me, the earliest Christian Ekklēsía and what Paul was trying to accomplish in the context of these cultures that were radically different from Jerusalem was teaching people how do we, in all of our difference, belong to each other. If we see each other in the image of God, it should be easy. But we live in a world where structures pull us apart in all kinds of ways. I see the Christian Ekklēsía as a reimagining of this assembly, grounded in mutual belonging and interdependence. The New Testament doesn't present a perfect model of liberation. Rather, it preserves an ongoing struggle to become a community in which participation is no longer determined by privilege alone. Dr. Matthews frequently described the Spirit as a democratizing force, a phrase that captures the way Acts depicts participation expanding beyond the expected social, ethnic, and religious boundaries. For instance, at the moment that is considered the birthday of the Christian church, we call it Pentecost, speech is no longer limited to a privileged few. Many were able to suddenly speak foreign languages to communicate with all people. Not just men prophesied, but women prophesied. Non-Jews, what they called Gentiles, received the Holy Spirit. And of course, Paul and Jesus were speaking to Jewish audiences, so that was a really big deal to them. And social and ethnic boundaries were also crossed. So if the Spirit is a democratizing force, I think it is so because it repeatedly disrupts conventional systems of access and authority. By reimagining assembly around interdependence, like the human body, rather than status, Paul challenged the ancient tendency to overlook the very people upon whom every community depended. And the challenge facing the early church still remains today because every community decides who belongs there, whose voice matters, and whether the people who sustain communal life will remain invisible or be recognized as indispensable, as I will share with you in 2 weeks in my presentation on the Philippines. So the sacred way did not end at the sanctuary gates. Likewise, the Christian Ekklēsía was not and is not, I don't think, simply an assembly or even church. To me, to be in the Ekklēsía is a sacred way, an ongoing process of learning how to belong to each other. The end. And I ended with the exit sign from the subway because it is Exodus. The word in Greek, modern Greek for exit is Exodus. We absolutely loved that. So,
Huh.
all right. I know there were things in the chat. I hope I'm seeing, I guess somebody answered some of these things. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So, thoughts, questions. Would you like me to go back, circle back to some images so you could see it again? Oh, George and Marianne are on. Welcome. It's so good to see you.
You know, it was interesting when you were showing the Odeon. It hasn't changed.
No,
Yeah,
not in 2,000 years.
No, actually.
yeah. The correlation between ancient and modern, it, it's all correlated.
Mhm.
That was fantastic, Michelle.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Thank you. So we had to write our final papers from that class, and that's essentially what my paper was about. And it's just was fun to get to actually put it together with pictures. And hopefully the pictures meant something with what I was talking about, even though they weren't all naturally that way, but I saw something in them. So Tracy.
Okay, this is a question about a photo in the beginning in Olympia, I believe, where there was a victor. And did he have wings on his back?
Yeah,
Did that depict how fast he was? Yes, that one.
Oh, where'd it go?
I
Oh,
guess it's the
sorry,
top.
I have to quit this and then go back to it. Let me see. Thought I had it.
You did. We
There
saw
we
it.
go. There we go. There we go.
Yeah. That fella.
So
Was
this
that part of what he
fella,
got besides the little wreath over his head? He got wings.
right. It is interesting. And also, the person bestowing the triumph on him has wings. So it's almost as though he's portrayed as not just an Olympic victor, but as someone who maybe has some extra, again, their status was important in that regard. As long as you were humble, you could still strive to be great, but you had to be humble about it. So perhaps they just figured, well, you're the victor, you're almost like the gods. But I don't know. I don't remember. And I invite Margie, since she's here, if you know anything to add, you're welcome to jump in and add it. But that's kind of my assumption about that. This was a tile floor found in a house near Olympia.
This was actually the original ad for Red Bull.
Right.
Rick.
Michelle, I was just going to say that it was excellent presentation. I was there and you saw so much of what I saw, but I think it's very interesting because what you did your integrated paper is similar to what I did mine on in reiterating or talking about how we see, what was the saying? What was it that Dr. Williams said? What was his quote? that struck you so emotionally?
Oh, where we sit determines how we respond.
Right. And so the way I teed my paper up, I'm talking about have you all heard of Magic Eyes? You know, the Magic Eye books, and you look at it, and if you look at it a certain way, you can't see the image, and you have to hold your head a certain way. It's the way we interpret life, and it's the way we sit and the way we view things. So I think that is very powerful lesson in this whole experience is that we all sit and come from a different place. We're in the United States or wherever we're at. And, you know, you're white, you're affluent, or you're this or you're that. And the way we interpret it, like we might miss totally that in Corinth, most of all of Corinth were manumitted people, free people who built that whole community. So I think we had two professors who really high octane professors who really challenged us to look at things very differently. And just I'll say this one last thing. One of our first, I forgot her name, our tour guide, the very first one, she
Maria.
was Maria was showing us about walking up the sacred way to the Acropolis. And she was commenting about this. She's Greek and she is very proud of her country. And she said, "We are the founders of democracy." And there's a lot of pride in that. And then Dr. Williams leaned over to me and he said, "Yes, but not everyone could proceed up that mountain. That was for the elite of the city that were allowed to go up there." So, you know, things are presented to us in a certain way that we don't always see at prima facie, at face value. We have to really look beneath, just like when you walked into the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, you look below and you see what was there 2 to 3,000 years ago. Anyway, fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and you know, that just reminded me, if I can remember, because I just flew out of my head. What were we just talking about? Being able to access. So not just access due to your status in society, but physical access. Even now, we all noticed that every hotel, even the new hotels that we stayed at, well, no, I guess that had an elevator, but many of the places that we stayed in, some of the smaller communities, there's no ADA compliance. So there were a lot of public buildings and the hotels that we stayed at that if you were handicapped physically, you would not have been able to do it. And we had to lift and carry our luggage up multiple steps, in addition to just walking up the steps that some places didn't have access. They had an elevator to a certain floor, and then one hotel said the elevator only goes to the seventh floor, but breakfast is on the eighth floor. So you get off the elevator on the seventh floor and have to walk up a flight of stairs just to have breakfast. And so there's nothing holding that accountable. So clearly, still, there are people in this Greek society that are not considered when they're building their buildings. So. All right. Who else? Oh, come on.
I I just have to say I really enjoyed it. I think my favorite was the hanging. I made a note of it.
Monasteries.
Yes, the hanging monasteries.
Put that.
I think those are so absolutely beautiful. And then just to think about having to build them and like or get there. I
Right.
just I freak out going over a bridge while driving my car off the two. That would be like I'd love to see it, but it'd also be a heart attack. And I'd be like, let me just stay as close to the wall as possible.
How did you get, were there staircases to get up there?
Yes, stairs.
Okay,
We weren't offered an elevator, so I don't know if there was one yet.
probably not.
Well, we
Um,
drove up to, you know, the higher, we drove up the mountain. There is a road to get up to the mountain, but then, yeah, once you're in there, you have to physically walk around. But there were originally, I don't know how far this, like what, 15th century, they built these, and there were 24 of these. You drive along the highway there and you can see there's six of them still. I think six. Is it
Seven.
six? Seven existing now. We went to the monastery of Valram, which is, I think, the more famous one. But yeah, it's incredible, Herculean effort to build those.
Do monks still live there, or are they? Yes.
Oh yeah. They live in all of them. There is one that they do not allow tours or outsiders at all. It's a true silent monastery. Um, and some of the guys that were at these monasteries left to go there because, when you become a monk, you kind of want to be in a contemplative space. That's why you choose to live that way. And so some of these have opened to tourism, and as a result, they're not very quiet. But some of them, like this one, looks so beautiful and well kept, and I think it's because they like the money from the tours, and it's also been able to help them keep their property up as well. But to go back to what you're talking about here, the height. So originally, they think that the first monks to go up there actually physically mountain climbed with their hands and feet, like rock climbers, to get up there. And then they put a pulley system in that would help them lift up the supplies that they need from the ground. Um, and so before roads were put in, and I don't know if there may be this one on the right, I'm not sure, but it may still be accessed not by cars necessarily. I'm not quite sure. Put in
Aliens.
on the road. Alien.
Was
Horses.
the purpose? Was the purpose to be closer to heaven, to God, or what was the?
I don't know. Margie, do you remember?
Better real estate
I,
value.
I think that was kind of the idea. I was reading about that. It was they're suspended in the air, is what they say. I think that's what the word matera means. But it's, yeah, just closer to heaven.
Mhm. Well, they
And
look like it.
an
Did
interesting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, finish,
I
please.
was just going to say an interesting little side bet to this is the 1981 James Bond movie was filmed there.
Oh, wow.
What was the name of that? I forget. Oh, For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah, I'm hearing the song because that's the year I graduated. No,
Diane,
I
did
was
you have a
just gonna
question?
say, did Dr. Matthews talk about how there's the verses that women be silent in the church and how that gets reconciled? I mean, I know they kind of know the answer to this question, but how that gets reconciled with the fact that there were these women leaders in the early church.
We didn't go into that. It wasn't like we were having Bible study.
Oh, I would have been peppering her with
There,
questions.
there was probably, I think there might have been some reference to it, just assuming that, we're familiar with that. But if for those who aren't, there are some who literally read the Bible, and in the case of um, First Corinthians, where Paul is admonishing these women to shut up in church. He's not saying that they can't preach. He's not saying that they can't be church leaders. I think they were gossips. I think they were.
Actually, weren't those part of the books that he didn't write? Because like
Uh, oh, you're
seven
talking
of the
about Timothy.
no, there's like seven books that
Yeah.
that are in dispute whether, and I thought that was partly
I'd have to go back
I don't
and
know, I'd have
look
to look
at that
again.
because he
Yeah,
was
that was
talking.
like
He was
really
talking to
important to
the
me
church
at the
at
time.
Corinth. Yeah. He was
Yeah.
talking to the church at Corinth. So it has to be First or Second Corinthians. But there are several of the books that are undisputed Paul's writing. And then there are a number of books that she's referring to that scholars really can't agree whether he wrote them or an understudy or somebody else wrote them, and used his name just for credibility's sake. And in that case, I think we talked about that with Jim Hartley too, and we've talked about the canon of the Bible as well. But that some of that could have come from there. But I vaguely remember Paul talking to somebody at Corinth. So I would think it's in one of the books of Corinthians.
Well, it was in 1 Corinthians 14 where he
Okay.
talks about that. But to Diane's question, that was not the focus on this trip. I mean, Dr. Matthews does get into all of that New Testament studies in her Intro to New Testament. But for this course or this New Testament experience, we didn't. The focus on Corinthians was more towards, the people of Corinth and how they were free people and what that society looked like. So,
And helping us see Greece from the underbelly. You're traveling with two New Testament scholars who come at interpreting the New Testament from positions from their places of having been excluded. One from the feminist interpretation of the Bible, and the other a liberationist. And as an African American male, Dr. Williams obviously brings a lot of his own theses about the church, and not just the bright, shiny, happy parts of what we like to think of the early church, and even just the beauty of Greece, because we had classical tour guides. So they were telling us all the happy, shiny, wonderful parts of Greece. And then over here on the side, we had these professors saying, but. And so we could not get away from but throughout the entire trip. Anyone else have questions or want me to pull another picture back up that you want to ask about?
I have a question about the olive oil.
Olive
Did you
oil.
get to try some? Did you get to try some?
So we had a tasting. There were lots of different flavors. We also learned the proper way to test olive oil to see if it is a high grade olive oil. And I think it's so funny
Ooh.
because the way you're supposed to do it is you put a little in your mouth, but you're supposed to sip in like through your teeth this air, and and then swallow it, and then if it burns your throat going down, it's good. And it did burn our throats. And I would say it did taste good, but I was like, really? You wanted it? But that's once you aerated it like that, it would
Mm,
that burning, that warm burning sensation. So I thought that was
interesting.
kind of interesting. But one of the things I really appreciated, and the reason I used the picture in the presentation where I probably should have explained that, is that was where the whole community contributes, I think is what I was talking about. And one of the
Mhm.
things I appreciated about that particular uh, plant was they try to, nothing is wasted. They try to use every part of the harvest that the local farmers would bring to them. And so maybe not the leaves, but the branches get turned into wooden jewelry. The when the oil is pressed, it goes through this whole process, and the farmers don't pay to have their oil pressed. They get to take the olive oil away. The press company makes their money by taking a 10% cut of the olive oil itself. But they use all the different parts of what comes in originally, with all the twigs and the branches and the leaves and the dirt and everything else that's on there when they first dump it into the big kiln thing. Um, so I appreciated that. But that was a fascinating thing. And I also didn't show you the antique equipment that they used to use to make olive oil. They have a whole bunch of antique equipment outside in the front of their place. And just thinking of the concept of pressure and what happens to the olives and she said something about the gold, the liquid gold has always been there. It just takes pressure to reveal it or something like that. And I thought that's a great metaphor for life as well.
You know, when you were talking about the olive oil, I was wondering, do they ever combine olive oils? You know, like they do with Scotch. Is it essentially a single malt that it's just this is what it is, or do they combine some other olive oils to make like derivatives?
Blended Scotch.
Yeah.
No, I
Blended
don't
oil.
think so, Rick, because she talked about the grading of it as soon as it comes out of the machine. And so even if it was considered a lower grade olive oil, I didn't hear her say anything about blending it to make it a little better or anything like that.
I wondered.
Jim
One of the
Mulvaney.
things we learned that in Italy, to be Italian olive oil, it has to be only 45% Italian olives. And they bring over the cheaper Greek olive oil to blend with it to
So
reduce
the
their
blends are
costs.
Italian. As Stella said, Hellenic is pure.
It was interesting too in the olive uh, the olive oil making process. They had over 500 farmers that they contract with that come in there and they run they just do that farmer's batch at that point in time, and they take 10%, like Michelle said. And what this particular press does, this company, is they make their own cosmetics, and I'm not talking like makeup. I'm talking like soaps and lotions and things like that. So that was really cool to watch that whole thing and how they use all the products.
Mm.
It took a whole community. It was a very communal kind of thing.
I
Yeah,
always feel like
everywhere we
food
went.
should end.
Say it
Food
again.
should. I feel like food is like anything that usually is like a consumable. To me, feels like it is more of a community. Like in Fourth of July, you have the block parties. Everybody brings food. Like it to me, and I know you've talked about like our table. So I just look at that and go, food is just something that I think it should be a community. But I'm so happy you guys got to go and see that because I would just been like olive oil, which was different.
Well, and it was kind of cool that it was Kalamata. I'm not sure. I don't remember if the actual press company was located in that area or not. I was kind of, those were long driving days. So I was just glad to get off the bus for a while. But we did go through Kalamata. So if you like Kalamata olives, that's where they come from, and it's the only place they come from. It's just, that it can be called Kalamata. It's kind of like champagne, can only be called champagne if it comes from that region of France. So same thing with the Kalamata olives.
That,
Do they run
that is so cool.
do they run batches? 'Cause
One,
I'm wondering if there's how many farmers were doing their versions.
she said about 500.
500. And they just ran that batch for that farmer at that point in time. They
Yeah,
run them all separate.
because I'm wondering there's got to be some time in there that it's going to take to clean everything out to keep everything pure. Whereas if they mix them,
Nice. Anybody else?
Be able to view this again, right?
Yeah, the recording, you mean?
we'll see.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
If Rick decides to let you.
because
Okay.
I'd like to play this more than one time back. It
Me
was
too.
fantastic.
Sorry. All right. Well, we are pastime, I'm happy to stick on and keep talking for whoever wants to just chit chat in the after party, but feel free to jump off if you need to. And thank you so much for supporting me in this and supporting me on my seminary journey.